As I was driving over here, I was a little bit concerned about the traffic. I got about 5 miles in 15 to 20 minutes, and I thought, man, I am going to be late. I couldn't get out of Knoxville. It was just bumper to bumper. Nobody was moving. And I was getting quite frustrated with a lot of the drivers. I mean, because of the way they were just poking along, driving slow in the fast lane and all that. And then I thought, wait, what am I preaching on tonight? I don't know who has before, but I wondered if they gave the topics that the speakers needed help on. At least it is the case in my situation. You may have heard about the guy. You remember mood rings? They were a thing back in the 70s. You'd put them on and they'd turn colors. My sister had one. But a man bought one of those for his wife. He thought she'd be kind of interested in that. They're pretty rings, and they change colors. And he said whenever she was in a good mood, that ring would turn green. And whenever she was in a bad mood, it would leave a red mark on the forehead, his forehead right there. All kidding aside, though, anger, uncontrolled anger, is really a spiritual discipline. We're going to be talking from the Sermon on the Mount. As you said, as was Alan mentioned, I hope you'll open your Bible to Matthew chapter 5, because we're going to be looking at a passage there in just a moment. But anger really is something that maybe we don't talk enough about, because everybody I know struggles with it. People say, oh, it got the best of me. And so we do need to address the subject of anger and those outbursts of anger that sometimes happen in our lives. I hope that our lives are not characterized by those things. Sometimes we may make mistakes, and it's a once in a long time that we may mess up. That's the way it is with all sin. But if this is something that is ongoing in your life, I'm going to tell you why you really need to change it. And I also want to tell you why or how to maybe overcome the struggle that we have with anger. I'll give you a few pieces of advice. A number of years ago, a good friend of mine was driving down the road, and there's a 2-lane road in West Virginia. You can't, there's not a whole lot of straight stretches back home. And this guy was wanting to pass him as he drove, and he was just riding his bumper really close so that he could get around him, real quick when it did open up. And my friend was getting aggravated with how close he was driving and would tap his brakes every once in a while. You know how those things escalate. And eventually, this guy found a straightaway, and he zipped out and just gunned it, and so did my friend. And he wouldn't let him get back in, and a vehicle was coming in the opposite direction, and he would not relent. He was so mad at that guy behind him that man wrecked his car. He either had to hit us head on or just go off the road on the left. And he wrecked his car and injured himself. And my friend nearly caused a man to be killed that day. And he got in trouble with the law as well. That's what anger does when it's uncontrolled. I have spent time through the years counseling people with marriage issues. They'll come to my office and they'll tell me some things and seek some advice and help. And I remember on one occasion, a man and a woman who were having some serious marital problems. That man unloaded on his wife. He said some of the most hateful, hurtful things that you can ever imagine. And as he was saying those, I thought, I don't know how she can ever forgive him or forget those words. Those words were so painful. And I thought, I don't know how they're going to go forward from this, because she'll never be able to unhear what she heard. And that's what anger can do to you. Christianity is a religion that is more than externals. It's not just like behaving ourselves and doing a certain thing or even believing certain doctrines, like we believe in the Godhead and we believe in certain truths. It's more than just a formal ritual that we go through every Sunday. In our worship, we do the Lord's Supper, we say prayers, we listen to preaching, we sing songs. It's more than that too. And that's what the Sermon on the Mount is about in the first place. It's about a righteousness that exceeds. In Matthew chapter 5 and verse 20, he said, unless your righteousness exceed that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you'll not enter into the kingdom of heaven. We have to have a righteousness. They were great at externals. They really did those well. But he said, you're going to have to do better than that if you want to go to heaven. And as he taught in the Sermon on the Mount, he has these words to say in verse 43. He says, you have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Now, the law didn't teach that. He's telling us what people said. This is how religion had come down to them. There were people saying, you got to love your friends, your neighbors, but your enemies, you don't owe them anything in terms of love. You can hate them. But Jesus says, now, I know that's what you've heard, but I'm going to tell you the way it is. Love, but I say to you, love your enemies. Bless those who curse you, and do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. Our sonship is determined by whether or not we love our enemies and don't be ugly to them. Come back to chapter 5 and look at verse 21. You have heard that it was said of those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be in danger of the judgment. See, that's what they had been told. You can't murder. But listen, but I say to you, whoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment, and whoever says to his brother, Reka, shall be in danger of the council, but whoever says, you fool, will be in danger of hellfire. You know how I used to deal with that passage as a youth? Oh, I would never call anybody a fool. That was a bad word. You know, I would never have said, you fool. I would never. Now, I would call you a jerk, an ignoramus, stupid, dumb, doofus. I had 1,000 words I would use, but I wouldn't use that one. I don't think I was understanding what Jesus was teaching. Do you? He wasn't giving us permission. Just don't use these words. He's talking about the attitude. It's more than just your action. You know, some people get mad and kill people. You've heard you're not supposed to do that. Jesus says, you have to have a righteousness that exceeds. It's more than just the action. It's the attitude that causes people to act the way they do. I'm telling you, you can't hate somebody. You can't be angry with somebody without a cause. And these outbursts of anger that would cause you to insult somebody and call them names, you can't go to heaven like that. So I want to share with you some things that the Bible says about anger. I want to give you some warnings first about what God says about anger. And then I want to tell you some ways that we hopefully can overcome it if we struggle with it. First passage I'd like for you, and you probably know this one, Ephesians chapter 4, verses 26 and 27. It says, be angry and do not sin. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath. And then he concludes the verse, nor give place to the devil. You see, when you get angry, and this is why you shouldn't get angry. Here are God's warnings. When you get angry, you let the devil get a foothold in your life. You have just given place for him to get involved in your life. We saw it with Cain and Abel, didn't we? And we can just go right on down through history, and we can see how when the devil gets a foothold in your life, he'll end up trying to destroy you. God says there's a difference between being angry and being sinfully angry. He said you can be angry and not sin, but I'm afraid oftentimes our anger is the wrong kind of anger. It's one thing to be angry about our nation murdering babies in their mother's womb. It's all right to be angry about, a number of moral issues that we see taking place in our country today that are just absolutely opposed to Scripture. But oftentimes the things we get angry at are things that, really, they're things that God isn't mad about. I got in the slow lane. I thought I'd get over here and pass this guy and get back over here and pass this guy. And it ended up when I got over, it was slower than where I was. Should have stayed where I was. And I'll get angry. And, or you go into a line, maybe at the drive-thru at the bank, or maybe it's at the checkout at Walmart or something, and you get in the line that you think is going to get you through the fastest, and it's like price check, and you're standing there, and you get upset about things. God's not upset about that. I think oftentimes our anger are things that we shouldn't be angry about. He says, be angry, but don't sin. Don't let the sun go down on your anger or on your wrath. Don't let this thing seethe. Sometimes you can get mad at a person and you lay on your bed at night and you think about it, and it makes it bigger and bigger, and you get more and more angry. God says, don't do that. That's wrong. And usually what happens when we think a certain way, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. We end up acting on those things, and we give place to the devil. Another passage, Proverbs 15 and verse 1, says, a soft answer turns away wrath, but harsh words stir up anger. Harsh words stir up anger. It's so tempting when somebody just lets you have it. It just seems so natural to fire back and to get them better than they got you. And we kind of feel good after we do that. But Proverbs says, a soft answer turns away wrath. And in fact, what he goes on to say, Paul does in Romans chapter 12 that goes along with this same thing. Instead of fighting back, what did he say? If your enemy hungers, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink. For in so doing, you'll heap coals of fire on his head. Do not be overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good. When I moved to Carnes 15 years ago, somebody there, I think they were really disappointed that they hired me. Because that person, I couldn't get them to speak to me. I'd pass them in the building, I'd say hi, and they'd just glare. And this went on for a long time. They did speak to me when they had something they didn't like and wanted to tell me off about it. Then they spoke to me, and it was just really bad, and it was bothering me. And so I told my wife, I am going to work at making this person my friend. And so I began. I started writing little emails to them saying, hey, I really appreciate you. This person was active in some ways behind the scenes that nobody saw, and I took notice of those things, and I began to brag on this person and compliment them for what they do. And every little bit, I would just write to them and brag on them. Then I learned some things about their past, some really difficult things that they had gone through, things that lesser people would have turned their back on God. And so when I found out about that, I wrote and I said, listen, I didn't know all this happened to you. I am so proud of you and for your decisions to be faithful to God. And the way that you have overcome that. And I just did that for a number of months. And you know what? This person is one of my best friends today. This person will never leave an assembly worship time without coming to me and talking to me before services are over and before that person leaves. What I did is what Paul said to do. Don't be overcome with evil. You know what that does? It makes you want to respond in the same way. You want to give it right back to them. But he said, overcome evil with good. And I tried, and it worked. Paul acted like he knew something, like he knew what he was talking about. And of course he did, because he was inspired by the Holy Spirit. Don't allow yourself to get caught up in this to where you have this ongoing thing. God calls us to something better than that. He also says in Proverbs chapter 14 and verse 29, he who is slow to wrath has great understanding, but he who is impulsive exalts folly. If you're a man or a woman that gets really angry, and there are people, brethren, that brag about their anger. Boy, I told him off. I'm just a person that speaks my mind, and if I'll tell you what I think. And there are people that kind of talk like that and brag about that quality. And God says that's foolishness. The person who speaks whatever comes on their mind, that's an underdeveloped character that's engaged there. He said, don't let a person, cause you to do this. You be slow to wrath, and you'll avoid being foolish. Ecclesiastes 7 verse 9, do not hasten in your spirit to be angry, for anger rests in the bosom of fools. You don't want to be like that, do you? God's warning us here. Don't go down this path. And then again in Proverbs chapter 22, he says, make no friendship with an angry man. And with a furious man do not go, lest you learn his ways. And watch this, and set a snare for your soul. This isn't just about etiquette. This isn't just about politeness. This is heaven and hell. If we don't get a grip and a control on our anger and we allow it to go on uncontrolled, then we're risking our salvation. There's some things in the Bible that are difficult to understand. Peter said that about some of Paul's writings. And there are some things that I'll tell you, I'll scratch my head and I'll read commentaries and I'll look for clarification from somebody else because it is beyond me to figure it out. And there are some passages like that in the Bible, but I'm not mistaken this one. This is really plain. In fact, the next passage sums it up in a way that is hard. Turn in your Bibles to Galatians chapter 5. You remember the fruit of the Spirit, and then you have the works of the flesh? Listen to what he says about the works of the flesh. Now the works of the flesh are evident, verse 19, which are adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lewdness, idolatry, sorcery, hatred, contentions, jealousies, outbursts of wrath, selfish ambitions, dissensions, heresies, envy, murders, drunkenness, revelries, and the like, of which I tell you beforehand, just as I also told you in time past, that those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God, or the kingdom of God. I don't have any trouble understanding that one. There are some passages that are hard to understand. That one's pretty plain. And you know that this is how plain it is. If you make a practice of these things, you're not going to heaven. That ought to make us sit up and take notice and say, there are some things about the Bible I may not understand, but boy, I sure understand this. And if I do these things, he told me outright in a way that I cannot miss, that I'm not going to go to heaven if I do those things. In that list is outbursts of anger, uncontrolled anger. You would expect to see consistency. Jesus preached it in his Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5, and we see his followers, the apostles, teaching the same thing, and we even see beforehand that this is what was taught in the Old Testament as well. So, there's your warning. And they are clear. You will be foolish. You are opening yourself up to the devil. It will become a snare to you, and you'll not go make it to heaven if you have this issue with uncontrolled anger. So, what do we do about it? Well, and this is why I have the picture with the barbells and the church. You see, there's a big word called sanctification. It just means as we live our life in Christ that we are to develop ourselves and be more and more like Him, conformed to His image, Romans 8 and verse 29. We become more and more holy in the way we live our lives. And that doesn't come just by sitting on a couch. That comes by exercising your spirituality. We need to get up and start working out. And we probably have to work out in the area. You know how sometimes you'll work your biceps, or those who lift weights work their biceps and work their abs or work their calves. They're all different areas. Well, you know what? We may need to work out with respect to anger because it may be going unchecked and we're very underdeveloped in that area. How many times have church divisions occurred, and it's not because somebody was teaching false doctrine. It's because of outbursts of anger that cannot be controlled between one person and another person, and one goes one way and the other goes the other way. And maybe it's not to that degree, but one sits over here and another one sits over here, and they don't talk. Same thing. We've got a problem with anger. It's keeping us apart. So here, how do we overcome it? How do we exercise ourselves to overcome uncontrolled anger? The first thing is realize that you're hurting yourself. I think that's the first thing. We all kind of think a lot of ourselves, don't we? We all want the best for ourselves. We don't want to lose our souls. We want to go to heaven. I want you to understand that when you are involved in this way of life where you just are angry without cause, or you have these bouts of unbridled outbursts, you're hurting yourself. You may get someone told, but at what expense? You're home in heaven. It's not worth it. Maybe we need to think about that. Realize that our anger hurts us. Secondly, we need to grow in the grace of, self-control, or the discipline of self-control. In James chapter 1 and verse 29, James said, verse 19, so then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath. Then he goes on to say, for the wrath of man does not produce the righteousness of God. Oftentimes we're quick to anger. And he says, I want you to do the opposite. Because if you don't do the opposite, you're not going to produce the fruit of righteousness, which is one of those fruits of the Spirit, or fruit of the Spirit, that will assure us that we have a place in heaven. So we have to be careful. We have to, as Proverbs 15 and verse 1 said, respond, be slow to anger. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. I'll use myself. A few years ago, I got a phone call from the director at Polishing the Pulpit. And he said, I was hoping to catch you before you left. I just want to give you a heads up. Some guy has rented a moving truck. And on the side of this moving truck, he has put a billboard that has your picture on it and a couple other preachers on it. I think there were 3 of us in all, maybe 4, I don't remember exactly. But, and it accuses us of being false teachers. And he's parked it right on the main drag as you go down into Sevierville and on to Gatlinburg. He parked it right there. And he said, I just want you to have a heads up. Well, to say that I was angry is an understatement. I had never seen this guy before. I had never talked with him before. He had never talked with me before. He had never tried to communicate with me. I just get this plaster on the side of a truck, and the world, as well as, our brethren, were reading all these false accusations and lies and misconstruing facts. And I was pretty riled. And I'm glad I didn't see it when I got there. Because he called me, he gave me time to think. And it made all the difference in the world. And I'll tell you what I thought. A number of years ago, you remember the name Batsell Barrett Baxter? He used to be the preacher on the Herald of Truth. He used to have quite a bit of, hate mail and people because of a number of things regarding Herald of Truth. That's neither here nor there. But Brother Collins, Willard Collins, the president of David Lipscomb at the time, and Brother Ira North, went to the airport to pick him up. And this guy had written him up in a publication and just ripped into him most hateful talk and published that all through the brotherhood. And they picked up Brother Barrett Baxter. They picked him up and they went to a restaurant to have lunch. And when they were at lunch, one of the guys handed him this publication and said, "Have you read the latest on you?" And he said, "No, I've been traveling." And so they handed him that magazine. He looked at it and read it. And in the meantime, the waitress brought the food. They were figuring, to have some juicy gossip or angry talk about this guy that would be so brazen to do this. And when the waitress left, Brother Baxter said, "Mind if I lead us in prayer for the food?" And they said, "Sure." And he prayed for the food, and then he prayed for the man who wrote the article. And he prayed for that man's wife by name. And he prayed for that man's children by name. He knew them. And his response was to pray for them. And when they were done praying, Brother Ira North is the one who related this story. He said, nobody said anything more about it. It was done. And he showed himself to be what I believe Jesus looks like. I remembered that story by Brother Baxter. And so because I had time, I decided ahead of time, when I get to polishing the pulpit, I know there's going to be hundreds of people run up to me and say, "Did you see what did you see your picture out on the highway?" I knew that was going to happen. And sure enough, it did. Hundreds of people came to me and said, "Did you see?" And many of them had taken pictures of it to show me in case I had missed it. And what I decided to do in advance was I decided whenever anybody came to me and said that, I'd say, "Yes, I've seen it. Remember him in your prayers." That was my response to everybody. It kind of put an end to all the wrangling that would have really got me riled up. Because I know, if I talked about it very much, I'd be mad all over again. And it allowed me to what I believe do is exercise spiritual discipline in terms of self-control. And so I want to tell you that because sometimes the best answer is to respond with kindness. And that's what Jesus taught us. And that's what Paul said when he said, "Do not be overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good." Sometimes we need to just man up and bite our tongue and do and wish and bless. You remember what Jesus said, or Paul said, concerning those who are angry with us? He said, bless and curse not. It's not just enough to, I zip my lips. Boy, I could have said some stuff, but I closed my lips. That's good, but it doesn't yet reach the ethic of Jesus. He said, I want you to zip your lip, but I also want you to bless them. Do good for them. And he calls us to a high and holy way of life. And you're not going to get there if you don't exercise. You got to start looking at the events in your life that bring you anger and make you mad and decide intentionally, all right, here we go. What am I going to do with it? How can I do this and bring glory to God at the same time? Grow in the discipline of self-control. A third thing that you need to do is you need to choose your battles. You don't have to attend every fight that you've been invited to. Sometimes you can just let your reputation stand on its own merits. I remember in the Old Testament book of Nehemiah, Nehemiah had some detractors that did not want him to rebuild the walls, but he was proceeding and he was rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. And they said, listen, if you don't stop, we're going to tell the king of Persia that you're rebelling and you're trying to rebuild the walls so that you'll have a fortified city to fight him with. So you better come down here and talk to us, or we're going to go tell. Nehemiah said, I'm not coming to talk to you. I've got work to do. And if you want to go spread that lie, well, you can just go do that. I'm going to let my reputation stand on its own merits. And he did. I think we should live the kind of life that when some people hear things, they'll just say, I don't believe that's true. I don't think he'd do that. I was with lunch with a man, a preacher, on one occasion, and he acted so inappropriate with the waitress. I was embarrassed. I wanted to get up and leave. And when I later, years later, heard that maybe he had been inappropriate with another woman, I thought, that might be true, because I had seen what I had seen. I want to live my life in a way that when people hear things that are not true about me, that I will have left an impression with them that their first instinct, their default would be, I don't believe that's true. That's just loose lips. And I think that we need to live our lives. And again, that takes spiritual discipline. We don't have to get into this, hey, that's not true. You said something that isn't true. And then we get back and forth. Have you seen some of the back and forths on social media? These chains of back and forth argumentation with one another. And you come in the middle of it and you can't tell who's the troublemaker from the one who was attacked. They look the same to you. My mother-in-law used to say, don't argue with a fool, because the passerby may not know which one's the fool. And I thought that was pretty good advice. In fact, she got it from the Bible. Proverbs 26 and verse 4 says, do not answer a fool according to his folly, lest you be like him. So sometimes we just have to let people go. Let them act out, let them act ugly, and then just let people see the contrast. That's him and that's me. And I'll tell you, sometimes it's hard for me. Like, I get upset. I remember on one occasion we were at a Dairy Queen. No one was in the store. One person was in front of us. And this woman could not take we stood and stood and stood and stood. And I was really getting up. I was like getting angry inside. And the woman in front of me, finally somebody came to the counter and said, can I have your order? And boy, that woman just let loose on her. Said probably just about everything I was thinking. But when I saw it in her, I didn't want to be that person. She totally changed my attitude. And when I got up there, I apologized to the woman on behalf of the other woman. And I said, I understand you're having some problems today and short on work. You don't need to apologize to me. I would not have responded that way had I not seen the display from somebody else. We can learn from other people. And also, let me just add this, and this will be the final point. See it as an opportunity. We really need to look at anger and see it through the lens of Jesus. And then, there are times in life, we don't have to put our life on the line. Not in 21st century United States. We don't have to stand up and say, Jesus is Lord, and then expect somebody to cut our head off. It doesn't happen. We don't have to suffer. I often think when we go to heaven and we meet people like Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and Stephen and Antipas and all these people who gave their lives and had their lives on the line for the cause of Christ, what am I going to say? Well, one time I think somebody was making fun of me because I was carrying a Bible. Well, wow. That's nothing. What can I do? Well, here's what you can do. When there are times when you are put to the challenge and you feel that welling up within you, you remember whose you are and say, this is not just an aggravation. This is an opportunity to be like Jesus. You remember what the Apostle Peter said in 1 Peter 2 and verse 23, who when he was reviled did not revile in return. And when he suffered, he did not threaten, but he committed himself to him who judges righteously. That's what we need to do. When somebody makes you so angry that you are just ready to let them have it, you have enough discipline about you that you say, wait a second, this is an opportunity that I can be like Jesus, who when he was reviled did not revile back. And when he suffered just trusting God to take care of him. And when we do that and we become victorious over our anger and over the situation, then we can live and say, wow, that was pretty neat. I did something I didn't think I had the strength to do. And you can watch as your strength spiritually increases. I'm afraid many of us are at the same level of spirituality, many Christians, and they're not growing. They're where they were 30 years ago because they haven't been exercising. They've just been living life. They got baptized and then they've just been doing some general things. But what if we put ourselves to lifting the weights of spiritual maturity and we exercise ourselves and we see these opportunities that could turn south for us really quickly, but instead we take hold of those and say, I'm going to use this to make myself stand out and bring glory to God. That's what it means to be a Christian. It's not about just form. It's about the heart and the attitude. And that's what the Sermon on the Mount is about. That it goes deeper than just our outward actions. Don't allow anger to destroy your relationship with people here on earth. Don't allow anger to destroy the influence you have for Jesus. Don't allow anger to rob you of your heavenly home, which it's able to do. But rather, let's begin or continue maybe working out and strengthening our spiritual discipline of controlling our anger. I appreciate your attention.